Hello, and a warm welcome to all of you joining us today for this webinar on information data management and cultural heritage, which is held as part of the ICCROM lecture series. Just quickly to introduce myself, my name is Alison Heritage. I'm a heritage scientist, and I work in the strategic planning unit at ICCROM. For those of you joining us for the first time, ICCROM, the International Centre for the Study of the Preservation and Restoration of Cultural Property, is an intergovernmental organisation working in service to its 137 member states to promote the conservation of all forms of cultural heritage worldwide. Now, before we begin, just some quick housekeeping points for this webinar. You can send your questions and comments via the Q&A button that you can see at the bottom of the Zoom window. We'll also take up questions after the presentations by our panelists, but in case we don't get to your question due to a shortage of time, please do send us an email and we will get back to you. Our topic today is data management for cultural heritage. When we work with heritage, we work with data. It underpins everything we do. Preserving heritage is about preserving knowledge. And so it follows that we need to be mindful, not just of how we preserve and use heritage, but also of how we preserve and use heritage data. That data is increasingly digital. Today, databases are used to manage and store diverse types of heritage data, which we'll be hearing about today. They range in scale from big national databases through to those set up and run by individuals. With the development of free online tools and platforms, it's becoming more possible for institutions to set up databases. However, despite these improvements, many challenges remain. The speakers in our webinar today are all experts in this area, and we will be discussing some of the typical difficulties faced when creating and managing a database for cultural heritage, and some possible solutions to these. So it's my very great pleasure to now introduce you to the members of our panel. If you can switch your cameras on, please, and say a quick hello. Today we're joined by Hirofumi Ikawa from ICCROM. Hello. Joseph Padfield from the National Gallery in the UK.
Hello.
Annabelle Lee Enriquez from the GCI at USA.
Hello.
Ascanio D'Andrea, who is working in private practice in Italy.
Hello.
Maria Elena Corrado from the Italian Ministry of Culture.
Hello.
And we have Yuichi Takata and Peter Yanese from the Nara Cultural Heritage Research Institute from Japan.
Hello.
Hi. Okay. So in this webinar, our panelists will share their experiences in information data management and address questions such as, what should beginners in database construction keep in mind? Who is a database for and what do they want from it? What are useful tools for creating databases and visualizing data, and what can these offer? So now we're going to turn to my colleague at ICCROM and co-organizer for this webinar, Hirofumi Ikawa, to get us started. Hiro is a conservation architect and has worked as a senior specialist at the Agency for Cultural Affairs in Japan since 2018. And we're very lucky because he's currently working with us on secondment at ICCROM. Now, Hiro, you're going to set the scene for us with, I think, a cautionary tale about heritage data and databases. So, Hiro, over to you.
Thank you very much. So let me share the screen. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. I would like to share a bitter experience with you about database management. I would like to share a bitter experience with you and about database management. As we all know, cultural heritage faces many threats, and as we also all know, there are never sufficient resources to prepare for them. Some years ago, Together with some colleagues, we came up with the idea of creating a database to provide data insights for improving risk assessment for cultural heritage. It was a great idea. However, in practice, creating this database was not easy, and we learned a number of hard but important lessons, which I would like to share with you. First, we consulted with users to ask them what they wanted out of the database. They wanted the database to be secure, accessible to all, useful, reliable, comprehensive, user-friendly, and sustainable. We received many ideas from different people, and from these, we generated a lot of potential solutions, maybe too many. Next, we spoke with developers who asked many sensible, practical questions about who the database was for, what the user needs were, who would maintain it, what the production environment would be like, what kind of data would be included, how much data there would be, who would be responsible for it, and how backups and servers would be handled. A lot of questions, many of which we didn't have answers to. Despite numerous discussions between users and developers, a consensus could not be reached regarding the design of the database. This led to the project getting completely blocked, and in the end, our great idea never happened. The experience has taught us that creating a database for cultural heritage risk assessment is not easy. It requires collaboration and communication between users and developers to ensure that the database meets the need of both groups. In fact, we learned a number of important things. First, we learned that the problem is not always the technology, but rather the gap between the developer and the user. We also learned that too many simple ideas can very quickly make the project very complicated. And we learned that communication problems can also cause more problems. I felt really sad about this project. We had a great idea. Everyone wanted to work together, but we couldn't make it work. However, I have not lost hope. In fact, I hope that today's presentations might provide some useful tips on how to get a project like this to work. So I'm very interested to hear what our experts who are here with us today will say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Hiro. That was a really great and very useful introduction. I think the experience you describe, I'm sure it must resonate with many others here. And I think it really raises some fundamental issues that our other speakers will follow up on, who I hope can offer some solutions to your problems. And I'm very glad to hear that you haven't yet lost hope. Okay, so now I'm going to turn to our next speaker, Joseph Padfield. Joe is a conservation scientist at the National Gallery in London, where his work covers preventive conservation, colour science, technical examination of paintings, and digital image processing. His main research interests are in digital documentation and museum lighting. Now, Joe has extensive experience in the area of information management and database design, having undertaken many database projects at the National Gallery, and he's also involved in setting up the future IRIS DigiLab platform, which will be a European-wide infrastructure for heritage science. A good place to start with almost any story is at the beginning. So Joe is going to talk to us today about data and databases. Where to begin? Joe, over to you.
Thank you, Alison. I'll just share my screen. Right. Good afternoon. Yes, I'm Joe Padfield. I come from the scientific department of the National Gallery, and today I'm going to comment, as Alison said, about databases, where to begin. Now, if one looks at Wikipedia, as many of us do, it describes data is a collection of discrete values that convey information describing quantity, quality, fact, statistics, and other basic units of meaning. And it goes on to say that metadata is data that provides information about other data. So you kind of have a crossover between the two, and that a database is organized, it's an organized collection of data. So that in practice, this means we have a very wide range of possible digital resources. So from a painting's point of view, from a gallery and many other heritage institutions, we have a whole range of historic documentation. So handwritten notes and documents that can be scanned, previous outputs of printed documentation from analytical equipment that can all be gathered in and scanned and digitized for use. We have a whole raft of different born digital content in hundreds of different file formats. Lots of different binary raw data, existing sort of smaller databases or Office applications using SQL or MySQL type applications, and simple documents, so Excel spreadsheets or Word documents. Now, there are many possible sources, even the possible files or any possible sources of heritage data, even within one organization. So everything from bibliographies to surveys, images, spectra. Now, organizing everything can be a big task. So what I'd say is start small, but where possible, select solutions that could expand and connect in the future. So something that can grow. Now, planning and building databases can be a complex and time-consuming, as Hiro was implying, but in the long run, overall, they should improve efficiency. But one needs to remember the efficiency being improved may not be yours. So as a manager or someone running or involved in a database, it's probably going to be more work. But overall, it should be more efficient. And if in doubt, ask questions. There are lots of people that might be able to help. And this work is often and almost always a collaboration between different skill sets, as Hiro was implying. You do need to talk to each other, and it's often the root. Now, one of the things that's really important is defining your scope. Now, if one looks at what Google can tell you about, or if you have a look at what Wikipedia can tell you about, you can look at databases that define the universe. But it's not really realistic. So if you're looking at building a database, think about the scope. What data do you need and what do you want? And more realistically, what data are you able to collect or your users are willing to fill in? Databases are often broken up into distinct connectable parts. So people, paintings, equipment, and so on. And what you need to do is decide what is the critical metadata required to describe each of these parts. So a person would have a name, a date of birth, a painting might have a title and dimensions and an age. And so it's looking at what information you need to do and how is this metadata going to be used in the future and by whom? So what searching do people need? How do they want it to be displayed? Always try and make use of any appropriate internal or external standards that already exist. So there are standards to describe what a person is and what a painting is. There are lots of these in existence. So you don't need to start from scratch. Do make use of existing things and always document your decisions. Those difficult conversations between users and constructors and developers are often come down to loss of understanding, as Hiro was mentioning. So ensuring that you know what decisions you've made and why you've made them are often critical to actually achieve that understanding when you actually start to try and build things. Now, you also need to pick your own level of complexity. Databases can begin from very simple lists, such as the example on the left of a simple database for managing time for project management. You can have a project, a user, and then the event where someone carried out some work. Or you can look at larger relational databases like the one on the right, but they can expand to hundreds and hundreds of tables. But this one, you can have objects and locations and people and events and periods and examinations. So it looks at how complex does it need to be. But try not to overcomplicate things unless it's really needed. Just look at what you need to do at the core. Now, you may have heard of semantic modeling and linked open data, and this can even be more complex, and it can be extremely useful. This is about connecting knowledge of Joe is giving this talk. It's just a connection of things there. And you can then connect this talk to ICCROM and to all of you listening to this talk, and you can extend to define the universe, as I've said before. So do be careful about the scope. Semantic modeling and linked open data can be extremely useful for future-proofing your data as it connects to external and standard vocabularies and standard data sources and can allow advanced searching. But don't automatically jump to very complex databases if you don't actually need it to answer the question. Now, consider who a database is for. Is it a simple personal project? So if it is, a simple local spreadsheet or one of the now many free online tools might work fine. Is it a shared local system? Will you need to actually have a developer build a graphical interface with forms and search bars and, more importantly, instruction manuals and how it's used? Is it an open research resource? If a web-based system is needed, you will need some form of user management. Now, when it comes down to personal data and GDPR issues, you need to manage all of these things. Just think about it. If you don't need user data, there are solutions to do that. Is support maintenance needed? Now, many small databases, particularly if it's just a spreadsheet, you can look after yourself. As things grow, as the number of users grow and the complexity, some kind of IT infrastructure will be required and technical support, but this can often be done institutionally or through some kind of paid contract. But it's good to consider that as you're planning a database. And obviously there's the interest of licensing and reuse. Is your project going to be public? You should really think about licensing and reuse issues for your data anyway, but if it's going to be public, this really needs to be sorted out at the start, or it can lead to an awful lot of headaches going forward. Now, what should you use to build it? Now, some of my colleagues who are giving the presentations afterwards are going to be talking about some specific tools, but in general, look at things that are sustainable and practical. You want something that's supported by an active community of users. So ideally, if it's a more complex system within the heritage field, so that your tools will relate and support structures will actually fit your needs. But any sort of tool you're using, are people using it? Is it currently being developed? Is it being supported? You need clearly defined efficient procedures. Digital tools are not the answer, they're part of a journey. You have workflow. How are you doing this? What is the job that this database needs to fit into? You need to capture and document and manage the reuse of digital resources to look at how that fits into this workflow. It's very important to make sure it's helpful. Now, you want flexible software and tools to ensure that they can evolve as required. As we know, lots of things change over time. So ensuring something can grow with you is very useful, and it should complement what you're currently doing, an idea improve the workflows you already have. And then obviously you need to manage your data. Data management plans can be complex and a little tedious, but a clear description of when and how procedures should be used and who is responsible for what can be very important. If you're looking at a simple database, then your data management may well just be remember to back up your data. But ensuring that you have this covered and thought about is a very sensible solution. Now, to summarize, designing and building a perfect system is often a never-ending task, or at least it's actually research rather than a day-to-day activity. So try and aim for reliable and fit for purpose. It's a good target to go for. It's realistic and something that's very doable. Consider what's already used. If you're in a larger institution, are there already databases being used that you can also use? Can you make use of that? You don't need to build anything from scratch. Consider using existing supported toolbox systems or frameworks. You're going to hear about a few of them today. They can be customized to your use, but you don't need to develop again from scratch. And remember, software is always changing. Make sure you can easily export your data. All of the work that you've put in, the designs and your content, make sure you can get it out without having to pay more money. And as I've said before, if in doubt, ask questions. Someone else may also have worked in the same area, the same idea, and already have a solution to your problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I think that was great. Your talk really led on perfectly from Heroes in really giving us an overview of some of the things we need to think about when first starting out if we want to avoid some of the pitfalls that Hero described. And I think for me, very much a key take-home message is that we don't need to be perfect, but rather we just need workable solutions, and complexity can come later. And that good enough is precisely that, good enough. Okay, great. So now I have the pleasure of introducing Annabelle Lee Enriquez, who is a project specialist at the Getty Conservation Institute. Annabelle specializes in cultural heritage documentation and technology projects, data modeling, and knowledge organization. At the Getty, she works on the Arches project, which many of you may have heard of, and also the Arches for Science, or the DISCO project, which focuses on conservation science data management. Today, Annabelle is going to talk to us about the Arches Cultural Heritage Data Management Platform. So I'm going to pass the floor over to you, Annabelle. And yes, over to you.
Thank you, Alison, for that introduction. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Wait, oops. Oh no, sorry about that. All right, so the Arches Cultural Heritage Data Management Platform is the result of a project that began more than 10 years ago by the Getty Conservation Institute and World Monuments Fund in order to provide a software solution for built heritage inventories. And it has grown since then to be a fully featured tool for all kinds of cultural heritage data management. And the impetus for Arches was to prevent the frustrating scenario that Hirofumi described in his introduction. Most cultural heritage organizations do not have the time, resources, or technical expertise to create an information system from scratch that meets the full scope of their organizational and data needs. And so the Arches project developed software that incorporated some key design requirements, each of which would have been difficult for any organization to implement on its own. But we've been able to incorporate and integrate all of these requirements and more, addressing many of the common data management challenges in cultural heritage in order to fulfill our mission of enabling effective data management for the entire cultural heritage community. At its basic level, Arches is software that operates under an open source license for the code and is freely available, meaning there are no licensing fees and you can have an unlimited number of users. The Arches software is hosted on your own server or cloud service independently. And also Arches is supported by a growing community of heritage and technology professionals. And beyond that, the following are 3 important takeaways to consider regarding Arches. Number 1, Arches is purpose-built for important and complex data. As I mentioned, Arches was initially developed to accommodate built heritage inventory data, and the design process of making Arches suitable to describe the full scope and breadth of that data led to it being powerful and flexible enough to manage all kinds of complex data, but especially cultural heritage data. Second point, Arches is feature-rich and powerful. It gives organizations the ability to create high-quality structured data and use that data in ways that serve their own requirements. For example, this graphic shows some of the key features and capabilities of Arches. Under data discovery and visualization, Arches comes with the ability to search your data, whether that's geospatially, semantically, temporally, by relationships. And it also gives you the ability to view that data, whether it's on a map, via relationship graph, via time wheel, or via IIIF and 3D viewers, among many other ways. Under project and task management, Arches can help to manage work processes at your organization with workflows, which are step-by-step data entry interfaces that are integrated with your Arches data. And then perhaps the most powerful aspect of Arches are its data management features, including management for controlled vocabularies, finely tuned permissions access to define who gets to do what to what data, the ability to dynamically generate the user interface and data structure without coding. And everything relating to data management is done with the FAIR principles in mind. Arches has the ability to create findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data. Because one of our most important requirements for Arches is that the data that is created and managed using Arches outlives the software itself and is available for future generation. Ultimately, it's the data, your data, that matters. The third important aspect of Arches to understand is that it is extremely flexible, customizable, extensible, and inclusive, regardless of what languages you are using. More than 30 languages are currently represented in Arches implementations. As of Arches version 7, the platform is fully internationalized, giving organizations the ability to translate and localize their Arches implementation, regardless of number of languages or the directionality of the language script. Arches can be used regardless of where in the world you are, even remote places with penguins. For example, an implementation is in progress for South Georgia Island's cultural heritage sites. Arches can be used regardless of what data you are managing. For example, our colleagues at the Getty Research Institute are using it to manage art provenance data. Arches is inclusive of multiple methodologies. This shows how the Swedish Institute at Athens is organizing some of their archaeological field data using the CDOC CRM. And Arches can be used regardless of what scale your project is. The Cantan Naban in Ecuador is using Arches to record their heritage sites at a smaller regional level. And there are other implementations that are even smaller or much larger. So Arches is inclusive regardless of language, location, data, methodology, and scale. And in addition, Arches can be configured, customized, and or extended to meet your needs regardless of your purpose. This is a diverse set of independent Arches implementations that shows different purposes. For example, monitoring the environmental conditions data of the Magao Grottos, creating a 3D repository of historic sites, using satellite imagery to monitor threats to archaeological sites in the Middle East and North Africa, facilitating an archaeological consultations process for Greater London, recording information on tangible and intangible heritage, as well as globally significant biodiversity, serving as the hub of a citizen science crowdsourcing project to monitor the effects of climate change on archaeology in Florida, and even managing and visualizing science data as it pertains to heritage science. Arches has been used worldwide by nearly 100 organizations. This shows the flexibility of the platform, but this also speaks to its usefulness. And from an open source perspective, the more stakeholders and users, the stronger and more sustainable the software is. That's the end of my presentation, but do feel free to drop me some questions to answer during the Q&A, or check out these resources for more information. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Annabelle. That was a really lovely presentation. I also really enjoyed the penguins. And it's good to hear that there is a solution for at least some of Hero's problems. It was fascinating also just to see the sheer range of data projects that Arches is supporting, and showing us how tools like this really can put fair principles into action, which is so important. Arches is a really valuable tool that, as you say, is available for everyone to use. And I really hope that your presentation inspires some of those listening to give it a try. Now, I would like to turn to our fourth speaker today, Ascanio D'Andrea, who is an archaeologist, topographer, and an expert in geographical information systems. He works in both the public and private sector and is Director for Surveying and GIS at Arket SRL. I hope I've said that correctly, Ascanio, which is a firm he helped to found. He's worked on numerous archaeological projects worldwide, including Trajan's Forum and Herculaneum. And he has extensive experience in the use of GIS and other tools for managing excavations. Now, Ascanio is going to talk to us about data awareness for data effectiveness. And so, Ascanio, over to you.
Thank you, Halina. I will share the screen. So thank you. Good afternoon. With this short presentation, I will try to point out these two main topics: the importance of data awareness for data effectiveness. Try to highlight some tools and methods applied in a case study in Herculaneum. So the first thing we can consider to sum up the data management has a broad process for heritage values enhancement. I mean, it can allow us to describe, to represent, to communicate the attributes that are related to our heritage values in our heritage place. So the importance is to collect and to manage these attributes and this representation in the right way. The first thing to do is to understand exactly which is the relationships between the users and the tools, as we has already highlighted, also Annabelle. We can see from this graph that is strictly related the tools to the users to obtain an effective data management that are proportionally related between the data awareness and the data effectiveness. So obtaining, growing up the data awareness towards the users, it will grow up with the data effectiveness and can give us an effective data management. But how we can deal from user to data awareness? Normally, generally in heritage project, I mean complex heritage projects, we always need an interdisciplinary approach. This means that we have archaeologists, conservators, architects, scientists, geologists, or whatever we need to describe our context. This will produce, obviously, multiple data sources, these homogeneous data sources. The main goal for data management in this context is to keep in mind these three key points. So sharing this information, trying to code and to normalize the information in order to apply the same rules for all the actors of the context, but more than all the others, it's to relate and understand relations between data. This becomes the new trigger to create new information and create new knowledge. All these three topics will bring us to the real and concrete data awareness towards our data. I will just try to present very briefly this case study about Herculaneum. Herculaneum is a World Heritage Site near Pompeii in Italy, and I have the honor to join the project 20 years ago. So it's a very long time project. The common ground are obviously the users. It's an interdisciplinary team in this case, and all the digital tools that we were able to provide during these years were made during the activities in order to answer to immediate needs by the users, and are based so on their inputs directly, what they need and what they focus on. This is allow us to create a shared planning process to enhance our digital tools to produce new and valuable IT platform for dealing with the data. The first thing that the main approach we try to apply in Herculaneum is to split complex situation in simple one. That is to say, try to identify specific issues to solve, creating relations between all these issues in order to manage it in a one-way, in a correct way, and create standards and standard formats in order to allow users to talk each other within standard procedures for the data entry. All these three approach can bring us to the information. I think allows us to store the data in a proper way inside the databases. But when we talk about information, what exactly we are dealing with? If we go to the example with the sentence that a conservator can say, the decay of the features is equal to 4. From a data management point of view, we can split this sentence in three main elements: the type, the value, and the attributes. So you can read what the type is, the definitive possibility from which the selection is made. The value is the chosen element about the sentence, in this case it's 4, and the attribute is the real meaning of the sentence, what the user are asking for. So if one of these elements is missing, there is no information. This is a very basic concept, but it's a concept that can deal you to manage and to talk each other to the user and to really understand what is the task to be completed. From the user to the other world in Herculaneum, we try to describe our context, the attributes there I'm relating in the first slide. So how to describe, and for each component of our heritage, we have to answer these kind of answers. What is it? Where is it? Which is the state of the how big? What is close to? What is far from? So we need a common ground for describing our heritage and to share this process, these standards among all the users. We started from a simple task, so the work description, and we deal daily for the maintenance works, trying to start from this description to obtain our objects. So the lintels to be restored, the shelters, the plaster, the mosaics, each part of our heritage should be described and defined. From these kind of objects, once we have a shared knowledge about this attributes, we can define and we can represent them, for example, in a WebGIS. And the main thing that we can do at this step is to apply a quantity, not only qualitative data, but also calculate the importance and the intensity of this data. This is, for example, for the decorative figures, but it could be done for each kind of elements, in this case, the architectural elements. And from the representation of the objects, once we have the definition and representation, we can create classes of objects. So in this case, for example, we take into consideration the plaster. We can create a plaster class that can have his properties, his methods, his events, like in the programming code, and we can apply it to each object of our elements. So separating different classes and instances of these classes, we can reach our logical schema for the data management. So we can build a very effective database, geodatabase with spatial information. These are the main processes. Obviously, once you have defined all these kind of approach, you can provide your IT tools to deal with this data, to allow users to interact with this information within web application, customized or not customized, using proper software, or with WebGIS platform. I just put a very simple accelerated video about the WebGIS that we provide to the users in order to interact with different kind of typologies of data. So raster information, spatial information, images, archive data, all the coding about the spaces of the site, so each user will call the same place at the same name. So it seems to be simpler, but it's very important to code this information. So we can overlap archive information with historical maps or dealing with the collected images of the site. So I just go quickly about this. You can see this video very shortly. The main platform is made up with a very big databases and web application that can interact with users and from outside and from inside. The spatial information are managed from the GeoServers, and through the API we can expose WMS, so the web map services that can interact through the WebGIS. It's a very complex platform, so it's just briefly described in this slide. So to sum up, from a data collection activity, data collection project, the main goal is to create awareness about this heritage data, providing these GIS tools or web application to create the effectiveness of this data, to reuse this information and create new information, new data. So the effective data management will bring us to a data resilience. We can explain data resilience as a data maintenance for long-term project. That is very important to keep in mind if we consider the next generation, they are going to use this information that they are going to provide. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Ascanio, for taking us on this journey from awareness to effectiveness. And I think the main take home I have from you is that heritage data lies at the root, really at the root of producing heritage knowledge. But if we want to turn data into knowledge, you really have to organize it and manage it. And importantly, of course, knowledge is only of value if it's shared and used, which takes us back again to the FAIR principles that Annabelle was talking about. So management is key to unlocking its potential. Use it or lose it. Now, I'm just being asked by our technical team just to ask those of you who are watching, please, if you have a question or you'd like to comment, use the Q&A button at the bottom. Don't raise your hand because unfortunately we won't be able to respond to you in that way. Okay, now I'd like to turn to our next speaker, who is Maria Elena Corrado, who is an architect specialized in monument preservation and settlement rehabilitation and recovery, and has been working since 2010 at the Italian Ministry of Culture, first in Turin and now in Rome, as well as the ICIERE, which is the Istituto Centrale per il Restauro, for whom she was involved in the recovery operation following the 2016 earthquake in central Italy, and she was also a part of Lazio's crisis unit. Maria Elena is going to give us a presentation on interoperability between the Ministry of Culture's databases. So Maria Elena, over to you.
Many thanks. Hello to everybody. Many thanks to ICCROM also on behalf of ICR Director, Architect Alessandra Marino, for this great opportunity of sharing knowledge with this expert. By the way, I'm not an informatics expert. I'm an official architect, and I am a user, and I'm working on user needs. So the system I'm going to show you is Vincoli in Rete. Vincoli is a legal term. It could be translated in English, cultural heritage online, and it was born in 2012 with the Objective 10 Ministry of Public Administration Innovation eGov plan as a part of a program of intervention for digital innovation in the cultural heritage sector. The original intervention focuses were the integration of the protection decrees updating procedures available in the original system, the verification of existing databases at the ministry for all the protection decrees already issued, and the access to the functionality based on cartography. This is the website, vincolinrete.beniculturali.it. Of course, is only on national territory. And Vincoli in Rete VIR was born to collect many different national databases in our Ministry of Culture. So VIR, the cartographic base, together with other types of maps, is taken from Google Maps in order to make the consultation familiar to all kinds of users. And these are the main database that are collected inside VIR. VIR is supposed to be a cultural and cartographical and anographical hub for our databases. The first one is the catalog. Every one of them come from different offices of our ministry. The catalog is very important for Monument because they can give us the unique catalog number, fundamental instrument for a univocal identification of the object. Then there is Beni Tutelati that can give to us all the cultural interest verification processes and all the private decrees that are created for protection of private monuments. And then there is Risk Map, who give to the system risk assessment for cultural heritage. And then there are other like CTAP for the landscape protection and SecuRART that it's in progress and maybe will be unified with Risk Map for MIC properties and emergency events. This is a sort of scheme for interoperability. I'm sorry, I don't know if you can see it completely. And all around there are the external institutions like universities, civil protection, firemen, and carabinieri of cultural heritage. And inside the circle, there are all the ministerial database that I just mentioned. And when there is the double direction arrows, that means that we can exchange information between these institutions, while in other cases, they only take from us information. But this is very important because they can, in an emergency, for instance, the fireman can take in a fast way all the information they need for be careful when they have to intervene in a city, in a zone where there is an emergency in order to protect our monuments. And from university and other institution, we can have information important for the territory, for instance, for environment or geological information. And for being more in detail for Beni Tutelati, currently for real estate, each procedure entered in Beni Tutelati automatically generates in VIR an anagraphical form. The main elements of the document are visible to everyone, while the scan of the decree is available only to MIC officials because it contains sensitive information. And this is an image of the very center of Rome with all these points that are circular if they are archaeological, square if they are architectural. The red one means they have a specific decree. And it can also happen like here in Bologna that we can also insert perimeters in order to be clearer to which are the part of the center that the cities or the territory that contains important information in our database. This is an example of landscape protection, and then there is the interoperation between the catalog. As I said, the catalog can give us a key information like the unique catalog code, very important to avoid double information, but also vocabularies and lexicon, because the most important thing is to share the same language. That is something very difficult to obtain. And then recently, we are inserting from catalog also mobile assets and containers. Mobile assets are concentrated in containers that are building that can be with or without the association with an immovable asset. For instance, also in the case of an emergency, we can find in VIR a church, and if there is also the container, the official or the civil protection can go inside the container and see, for instance, in this case, that there are 362 art objects inside this church, so they can have the list of all the art objects inside, and for every object they can have the form from the catalog, and they can go on the emergency sites knowing very well what to find. And for resuming the data inside the VIR, we can see that at the moment, because everything is in progress, we can have more of 200,000 architecture, and also, for instance, between the other things, more than 2 million of art objects. And if we speak about risk map needs VIR because in order to evaluate territorial vulnerability, risk map needs to know cultural heritage concentration. On the other hand, in risk map, vulnerability forms for single items are drawn up, distinguished by various types. We have vulnerability form, archaeological, architectural, and more of them. Here we can see what we intend for risk. A risk is a function of vulnerability and dangerousness. Vulnerability is given by CH concentration or also vulnerability form for a single monument, while dangerousness is given to us by the information of other institutions. Comparing them and collecting them on VIR, we can find which is the risk for a monument. Unfortunately, in this case, this wasn't a risk. This has been transformed in damage, but this is a church in which we are working on. And the more important thing is the correct use and correct use of VIR, especially at the moment, these instruments cannot be used for certification. For official authorization, every information must always be confirmed by the competent territorial office of our ministry. But the important is that for public officers, this system can represent an important way for fast investigation, especially in the context of a protected area or a monument. For managers of areas, these are rapid support system for conservation, monitoring and control strategies. For professionals, it's an help for collecting a lot of important information when starting a project. And in emergency situation, for civil protection, firemen, carabinieri, these are fundamental instruments to quickly know a lot of different information relating to a damaged area. Wow, that's all. It was a lot of things to say. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much indeed, Maria Elena. I think your presentation really showed us the vital importance of being able to access good quality data in emergency situations, and again highlights the need for interoperable, freely available data. But more than that, we need not only to be aware of these resources, we also need to be able to use these resources. So it's a question of upskilling as well. Now, I turn to our final speakers, Yuichi Takata and Peter Yaneza from the Nara Cultural Heritage Research Institute in Japan. Yuichi is an archaeologist who's been doing some really quite remarkable work, which we'll see in a minute, using information technology to dig into archaeological and historical data sets to reveal new insights. And Peter meanwhile is from Hungary, but undertook his doctorate in Japan and now works at the Nara National Research Institute, where along with digital humanities, he studies Minakata Kumagusu, sorry for the awful pronunciation, which is the reception of foreign ideas in Meiji Japan. So Yuichi and Peter have kindly pre-prepared a presentation for you, which I hope you will enjoy. And I now ask our ICCROM team if they could kindly play the presentation. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Yuichi Takata. I am a chief researcher at the Nara National Research Institute for Cultural Properties. Today, my colleague Peter Yanase and I will give you some tips on what you can do to ensure the longevity of your data and databases based on our experience. First, let me introduce our database and the institute behind it. Nabunken is a national institute whose primary function is to do all manners of research related to Japanese cultural heritage. Archaeology-related research is especially prominent at our institute. The comprehensive database of archaeological site reports in Japan, SORAN for short, is Japan's largest repository and aggregator of archaeological data and information. SORAN is an index of domestic archaeological excavations and a repository of archaeological data. Its catalog currently contains information on roughly 140,000 archaeological interventions and 110,000 publications. About 30,000 of the publications are available in PDF. We had just published a new platform developed together with the National Institute of Advanced Industrial Science and Technology. This service maps 3D heritage data on a 3D map. Let me show you. This is Mount Fuji. Many cultural heritage sites can be found around it. You can easily see the location of archaeological sites nearby with the service. When you want to learn more about a given site, you can click on Details and go straight to Fieldwork Report. 3D data from the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism can also be displayed. You can easily see where cultural heritage is buried. You can also explore 3D models of burial mounds. Next, let us see our tips for your database. For starters, start small. You must always be aware of your available resources, but this is even more important when you start. Streamline your plans and focus on the essential functions and data first. SORAN was not built in a day. Back in 2015, SORAN had less functions, less data, and less kinds of data. It looked quite different than today. Connecting everything contained in your database is a good idea. You can also connect with other databases by sharing your metadata. In SORAN, academic papers contained in fieldwork reports are connected directly to the given report. Everything else is connected automatically based on the similarity of their content and descriptions. This way, users can easily find similar or related content on the portal. Data registered in Solr is kept inside Solr, but the metadata is shared with other services to improve discoverability and extend functionality.
Hello, my name is Peter Janesse. I'm a project researcher at the same institute. I will take over for a while from here. Make it accessible. It goes without saying that freely accessible databases will have more users than closed ones. Making data accessible to everyone is not only the right thing to do, but more users also mean more support for your database. Another important matter to think about is how to solve the problem of language barriers. The language barrier is not an easy problem to solve. We have translated the user face to English. Many of the keywords contained in the database are translated to English, and you can search in English and get Japanese results. We have also shared our metadata with Ariadne Plus, a European infrastructure that supports many European languages. We are constantly working on improving the support for English and plan to add Chinese and Korean later. Cater for data providers. In order to grow, you need more data. To have more data, you need active data providers. Data providers need incentives to use your database. It is also important to let them easily download all their data. As we have already mentioned, Solr acts as a hub. Metadata registered in the service is shared with other services, thus allowing data providers to share information on many different sites without any extra work. Data providers can also easily download their data, including all the generated metadata in plain text files. This way, they can easily make backups or further process data uploaded to Solr. Get more users. If you do not provide what people need, they will not use your database. But even if you do, if they do not know about your database, they will not use it. Just because you have built it, they will not come. Marketing is an important tool in growing your database. As we have already mentioned, connecting to other databases is also helpful. The more roads lead to your database, the better. The more people know about your database, the more users you can get. And the more users will find your database helpful, the more support you can get. Tidy it up. Noisy data is not useful and users do not like it. Constantly work on improving the quality of your data. High quality and freely available data will live on even if your database shuts down. As long as your data is useful, people will keep on using it.
Here are some stats for our database to show you how all this has worked out for us. As you can see, the number of visitors have risen over the years. Data providers also upload more and more data. Users also download more and more data every year. Stats are a very powerful tool you can use to earn the trust of shareholders and justify financial support for your database.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Yuchi and Peter. That was really inspiring. Incredible demonstration of scaling up. But as you say, start small. And for me, I think a real key take-home point was your comment about having a marketing perspective towards this. Know what your customers want and get them to use your services and then keep them coming back for more, which is in a way the essentials of good business management. So once again, I think it underlines the point that it's thinking about how we create value, not just through providing data, but also a data service and making it easy for people to use. Now, I'd just like to thank once again all of our panelists for their really stimulating presentations. And now I'd like to invite them all to come back as we've set aside some time for discussion. And we've received many interesting questions and comments, and I will do my best to put as many as I can to our panelists. And of course, while we're talking, if you have a question or would like to add a comment, please do write to us in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to weave you into the conversation. I think, though, I would just like to start with a fairly basic question. And in a way, maybe I address this to Joe, but please, anyone who wants to jump in and add a comment, please do. Joe, there's never enough money or time or resources. And so how do we balance our data management with our limited resources? And I noticed also that there was a comment or a question also in the chat about the amount of storage that's needed, the computer power, you know, can we get around this by using things like cell phones? So yeah, what are your thoughts on that then?
I think a lot of, as I said in my presentation, one of the things about databases is that intention is to make things more efficient. So on an institutional basis, the chances are you're doing all the work anyway, but it just takes a lot longer to do it, to send emails back and forward, to handwritten notes, to consult sort of handwritten documents or whatever. So the organization of a database can actually save an institution time and money and effort. Now, the difficulty is if you produce a very nice database, people do more with it and it absorbs more time, so that immediate short-term efficiency is often missed. Lots of systems can work on phones. Many simple databases, I mentioned Trello, which is a way of doing simple lists. There are many online database systems that can provide access on mobile phones. The issue is then one of interconnected access and whether you're in a location with a good telephone signal. And living in the central London as I do, I have absolutely no mobile phone signal in my house. So it's no guarantee that you're going to have a mobile phone signal no matter where you are in the world, and many places don't. So looking at something that will work on handheld devices with a bit more processing power, so you can actually run things locally and then sync it back in with an institutional database when you go back to your institution, may well be a more sensible approach. But there are tools and people are building lots of things that will work on handheld devices. So that's definitely an option. And I think the whole efficiency thing is, as a couple of people said as well, if you start small, you're looking to solve specific problems and you can justify those problems have been solved, and then you can expand to solve more problems. And most of the time, the way to get more money from institutions is to demonstrate it works. And that's a chicken and an egg problem, is how you build something that works, thus to justify the money to build the thing that works, is you have to start small and build up. Unless there is some development money or some special event that can foster a larger amount of money to begin with.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else want to jump in and add a comment to that? Okay. Yeah, I think it was very interesting actually. We had some questions also coming in about, I think in terms of, well, just picking up further about, you know, other technologies. There was an interesting question actually about whether, you know, emerging technologies such as AI rather, or blockchain that we, you know, so much in the news at the moment, you know, do you anticipate that these might even be included within database management in the future? That's an open question. Who would like to jump in to answer that one? Oh, Joe, you can have a go at that one.
The new technologies, I mean, people are playing with ChatGPT now a lot and many other AI solutions. The difficulty is they tend to make things up. I think it was mentioned in the chat that I was looking at ChatGPT while Annabelle was giving her talk, and I was trying to convince it that Arches for Science existed. And it's quite happy with the existence of Arches. You'll be glad to know, Annabelle. But Arches for Science, it couldn't quite, I kept on giving it the link and it went, oh yes, it exists. But then when I asked it again, it said, oh, I don't understand that, and started telling me about architecture. So the difficulty with AI, I think we're quite a bit away from it being directly trustworthy, and they make things up. Blockchains are an interesting issue. Up until very recently, they used an awful lot of power. That's changed in the last year or so. So potentially using blockchains as a persistent identification system or some way of logging identity of things across multiple systems could be possible, but I haven't seen it being used in that context yet. So I think Conservation in general, across all of heritage, we make use of all of the opportunities that technology provides to try and look after our heritage. And I would not be surprised if both of these will be extensively exploited in the coming years.
Yeah, Annabelle, have you got a comment about AI and arches?
Yeah, no, I'd say that that's actually right on the money in that we keep getting questions on this recently. We've been getting a lot of questions on whether Arches can, well, whether Arches is AI or whether it can accommodate AI. But my comment about that is more broad in that we anticipate that there will be always be new technologies, which is why we built Arches to be as modular as possible. So, I mean, what Joe said about ChatGPT is correct. We've been playing around with it and seeing what gets returned back to us, and sometimes in horror, but generally it's okay. If an organization wants to extend Arches to utilize some AI for maybe smaller tasks, they can extend Arches to do that because of the open source nature of the software.
Great, thank you. I don't know if you, Yuchi, Peter, have anything to add about AI and whether you see that as being something within your system in the future?
Yes, not exactly artificial intelligence, but we have been experimenting with deep learning technology, and especially for improving search functionality for images, which is very important in cultural heritage data. And we are also using natural language processing for analyzing the data and also for translating purposes.
Yeah, really, really interesting stuff. I'd now like to turn to another question that's kind of popping up, which I think typically seem to go hand in hand actually with the AI question, and that's the whole question of ethics. You know, this is the AI, of course, is throwing up a lot of questions about ethics. The whole issue of data sharing throws up a lot of questions about ethics, and we also had a question about IP rights and how those, are best managed within, these kind of large, open access and shared databases. Does anyone want to have a go at that one? How can, what other ethical issues do you see coming up, and specifically also in relation to IP rights? Joe?
I talk too much. One of the things about ethics is that people can put a huge amount of work into this. You can see from the presentations that were given before that the software itself takes a lot to develop, but the amount of work that's been done on the content in these examples that were shown is huge over many, many years. And people can rightly feel a little concerned about making that open and shareable. Someone else is going to go off and do something with it and where it's going to go. A large part of sharing data comes down to ensuring that people are properly cited and given the attribution and credit for the work that they've done. And the ability to do that is improving. There are many sort of open data set structures like Zenodo, which is the EU catch-all data repository, which is a free place to upload data and present data. And in doing that, you get a DOI, a persistent identifier, that you can then reference your data and discuss your data. This isn't a database for working with your data, but it's a way in which you can present it for sharing and properly put your name and the name of the institutions and the funders who've been involved in the work, your other colleagues, against a data set that people can then reference and talk about. The EU have introduced a number of things related to their research projects of different models of publication, of how that can be related to data and methodology and procedures and software, as well as a finished research article. So I think the notion of credit and attribution is extremely important when looking at databases. I did hear a story years ago of some professor in Canada getting his professorship through editing Wikipedia, but I've never actually seen anything written down about that to confirm it. But it was talking about hundreds of thousands of edits on Wikipedia. But I think that's the issue. People see digital as being magic and just happens. And I think the ability to clear that, yes, it can make things easier, but there's a lot of work gone into that. And people need to be attributed and be able to cite these things to who built that add-on to Arches, and how can you cite that and attribute that and accredit that work when then someone else uses it going forward in the future. There's a lot of work in this area, but it is something to definitely consider.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and that connects with very much with the comment that was coming up about the growing number, given we've got a growing number of data providers, how you might need a data validation mechanism in the workflow. Not just to check the data, but also to attribute it and credit it. I have a question here for Ascanio. All right, Ascanio, you talking about connecting data, you mentioned the importance of having a common ground for describing heritage data. How can we achieve this in practice? And can you give us some good examples?
Yeah, we describe this common ground to be shared among the users. I try to highlight the important thing is to share the common language. I mean, to define which is the object and the context that you are describing. So if we are in an archaeological site or in a gallery or in, I don't know, intangible heritage, the important thing is to starting by defining which is the focus with the same words, the same spaces, the same codes. This is the base for sharing this information. This is strictly related also to the question about IE. I just want to comment a little bit about this, because remember that artificial intelligence must be trained, and if you train it not in the right way, it will give bad results. So it's the base is always to try to find these standards in these formats and to code information the right way to obtain the right results. So you can next step will be artificial intelligence or other technology that will grow up during next years, in the future.
Thanks, Ascanio. I also had a question actually for Maria Elena here, which is also related, when you're talking about the VIR system and how that can help manage cultural heritage protection, but how does it address issues, ethical issues really also related to data privacy and security? Can you comment on that?
Yes. Well, it's a word to explain, but anyway, first of all, we have a legislation on cultural heritage that is quite complicated, and it has many decades of development. So the first thing is that it's very important for managing this information to know well the law. And we always say on the homepage that for everything you can do, you have to speak with the territorial offices of our ministry, because this is only a knowledge system. And I want to say that the common people can see many things on the system, but there are some very delicate issues. For instance, the decrees, especially the decrees for private properties, cannot be shown entirely because they contain sensitive data about the owner. And so the people can see that that building has a decree, in which year it was made and which is the article of the law, who is it referred, but they cannot read everything inside the decree. The decree cannot be read from the people, can only be read from the officer. And the same is for the mobile object. You can understand that the security can be in risk if we put the list of the art object inside the building, readable to all the people. There are some elements that cannot be known from everybody, and also it must be clear how to use in a correct way these databases. But anyway, we try to leave open all we can and to explain to everybody the correct use. But of course, something is not possible to be shared to everybody. And we have different kind of users depending on their profession or their reasons, and they can enter in the system in different ways.
Thank you, Maria Elena. I think it's really interesting, also just thinking over the longer term, actually. And I've got a question here, really, that any of you can jump in, but it's also picking up on a point that I think, Yuchi, you were mentioning about the longevity of, well, in fact, actually, several of our speakers talked about this, the longevity of cultural heritage databases, in that how can we ensure that our databases remain sustainable and usable over time, and what might be some of the best practices for long-term data preservation. And I'm wondering also if there's a connection perhaps to the comments that are also being made about Wikidata. So who would like to start off with that one? Who can make a comment on sustainability? Annabelle.
So I did mention data longevity, but also software longevity. And I think those two things kind of go hand in hand, but we designed Arches so that you could export your data out with semantic metadata so that the data can be transferred to another system if in the event that the Arches software becomes outmoded. But in addition to that, we've definitely looked at how to make sure that the Arches software is maintained through the community of users, and are currently looking at solidifying actually fully defining our governance structure so that the software and the community exists for a long time. So that's definitely something we thought about.
Thanks. Ascanio.
Yes, just related about longevity and maintenance of data. I think the main point is to plan it at the very first stage of the project. It means to completely separate the design of the database, so talking about data, and the design of the software. It's two different approach, two different process that do not overlap in the same thing. They will talk each other, but the development from the software could follow different ways, depending on technologies, depending on resources, depending on a lot of things. But the structure of the database should follow specific topics, specific needs by the user. So there could be, they will go in parallel, but they do not have to overlap each other in order not to create cross points that cannot go forward. So this is very important to be planned at the very first stage of each project.
Thanks. Does anyone else have a further? I saw that there were some other hands up. Peter, did you have a comment to make on sustainability?
Yeah, but I guess I can only just double down on the importance of being able to export the data. And in the end, it's in a database, the data is the most important part. So ensuring that the data is available in a simple format that can be used even if the database itself shuts down is useful, not just for the data, but the data can be implemented in a different database, and it can be inherited by someone else, and that way it can live on.
Yeah.
As for the database itself, as long as it is useful for the users, they will support it, and then that leads to its longevity.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting actually, because we spend an awful lot of time thinking about how we can get data into databases, but maybe we should just as well be thinking about how we can get it out of them. since every tool, I guess, ultimately has a life cycle and eventually will become obsolete. Joe?
I think it's been mentioned by a couple of people, and it's worth reiterating that notion of standards. Is that if you build a database, as Skanio said, is if you design your database first and then you have a presentation and interrogation layer that sits on top, you can swap the database out and swap the interrogation layer out and go on. If you've mapped your data to international standards, then other people will be building software you can add on. So as noted, our Arches connects to some standard ontologies such as the CDOC CRM, linking to standard vocabularies such as Wikidata or the Getty vocabularies means that you're using the same language. As a nice example from the imaging point of view, there's an international standard called IIIF, which is the International Interoperability Standard for sharing images. And lots of people are starting to present images using this standard of IIIF. And it means that you can automatically make use of multiple free tools for presenting images, for annotating images, for viewing images and interacting with images. And these tools can all be incorporated into these bigger tools that people are developing for the management of data. So as long as you've standardized the language you used and the structures you use to look after your data, you can make use of multiple things now. And then moving your data to something else is even easier. So ensuring that you take that step in the design stage, as Skanio said, of looking at what type of information am I storing, what standards can help me structure this data, and then you are future-proofing yourself. You are helping yourself move forward with that sustainability.
I think that's a really, really fundamental point. And that actually these standards, they're not just for now, they're exactly that, they're for having more longevity and preserving, you know, the fruits of our efforts for the longer term. Ascanio, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, about this topic, I mean.
I see you have your hand up. Did you?
Oh, no, it's the previous one. No,
Oh,
it's okay. No. I completely agree what Joe said. I just can add that new technology about using APIs, for example, so the technology to describe your database and expose the data in a proper way, in a standard way, is the solution to give longevity to each kind of project, each kind of software and database. So using API will allow everybody to use their data.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it really does come back down to those FAIR principles. Maria Elena.
I wanted only to say that, for instance, RISC-MAP was born in the 90s, so it's very old. And the problem is that it has been re-engineered once between 2016 and 2018. And now it will be re-engineered another time because it changes the office and it's been improved with other functions. So the problem is that in this phase of reorganization, we have to wait for the interoperability, and there are some problems, of course, but anyway, RISC-MAP is always improving its potentiality, and it's quite the same of when it started. I mean, so you must always work on it, and I always say that it's something alive. So it's always in progress. I think we never stop working on it.
Great, thank you. Annabelle?
Yes, I definitely want to agree with Maria Elena in that, we're talking about standards, but also if you are going to be building your own database, you should be using technologies that are very well supported and well used. I noticed, for example, when Ascanio was showing his the software diagram, that there were a lot of common elements, for example, Postgres and PostGIS and other elements that, and we use these technologies because they're well supported, and they also have a community as well behind them. So that's something to also consider.
Thanks, Annabelle. Yeah, and I think you're so right. It really does come back down to that real importance of community, the community of users, and having the support through them in everything that we do. I think actually that we sadly we're running out of time now. But it's been really a fascinating conversation with all of you. I think I had just one last question actually that I'd like to put to Hero, and I'd like to ask you, Hero, are you more hopeful? How do you feel?
Of course, today's webinar was extremely informative, and I gained valuable insight from the panel's tips on database management. And I am excited to apply this new knowledge to improve my maybe next project. And I'm confident that the other attendees were also inspired to learn more about database management. So lastly, I want to express my gratitude to all panelists for their outstanding presentations. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Yes, and indeed, before we finish, I too would like to express my gratitude once again to all of our really great speakers, but also to our organising team here at ECROM that are working so hard behind the scenes. You don't see them, but they are there and they're working very hard to bring these webinars to you. And I would also finally like to thank all of you for taking the time, for joining us today and really raising some very thought-provoking and important questions. Just to let you know that the recorded version of this webinar will be made available shortly on our YouTube channel, which is linked to the ECROM website. And please take note that recordings of previous webinars are also available via the ECROM Lecture Series webpage. And information on our future webinars is also available on our website under the ECROM Lecture Series and other social media platforms. And indeed, we are now just sharing some information about the next one, which is coming up very soon on the 9th of March. So we hope you'll be able to join us then. Thank you for being with us. Take care and goodbye.